Hello there, I'm Kafi Khan and welcome back to my Android tutorials. In the previous video, we talked about list views and we implemented a custom adapter. If you haven't watched the video, please watch it. In today's video, we'll be talking about fragments. So, what is a fragment? Fragment is a portion of user interface in an activity. We can combine multiple fragments to build a multi-pane user interface. Fragments are modular, so we can reuse a fragment in multiple activities. And fragments have their own life cycle, just like activity. So let's compare both. So when we launch an activity, there are a series of callbacks. So let's see them one by one. So first is on create. So this is when the activity is initialized. Then we have on start. This is when the activity is visible. Then we have on resume. This is when the activity gets interactable. It comes on the foreground. And then we have on stop. This is when the activity is not visible anymore. And then on destroy. This is when the activity is destroyed. Similarly, for fragments, we've got a series of callbacks. The first is on attach. This is when the fragment is attached to the parent activity. Then we've got on create. This is where the fragment is initialized. Then we've got on create view. This is where the view is loaded. And then we've got on activity created. This is when the onCreate function of the parent activity is completed. And then we've got onStart. This is where the fragment is visible. Then we've got onResume, same way for activity. So this is where the fragment gets interactive. And then we've got onPause. This is where the fragment is no longer interactive. And then we've got onStop. Now the fragment is no more visible. And then we've got on destroy view. This is where the view is destroyed and the resources cleanup is triggered. And then we've got on destroy. This is where the fragment is destroyed and the fragment state is cleaned up and the fragment is gone. So let's get started. Let's create a new project. Let's call our project Fragment Introduction. So Fragment Introduction. Let's hit the next button. Again, we're going to keep minimum SDK as 15. Why? We know that so that we can run our application on almost 100% of the devices running Android in the world. Again, let's hit the next button. Let's start with an empty activity. And let's call our first activity as main activity. Well, the Android Studio is building our project, so let's wait. Well, the project's built and it's ready to go. To use fragments, we gotta add a dependency in the Gradle, so let's do that first. So application Gradle, so coming here. So implementation. com.android.support, again support v4 and 26.1.0. Let's sync the Gradle. Well, we've just added the v4 support library. Sorry, there's a spelling mistake. So let's just remove this extra t and try again. So the Gradle is built and we're ready to add a fragment. So application or Java file or directory, right click, new, and let's add a class. Let's call it demo fragment. Okay. And let's just hit the OK button. Well, we need this to be a subclass of fragment, so let's add that. So extends fragment. As you can see, there are two fragment classes. One is android.app, another is android.support.v4.app. So we're gonna add this support library fragment. So let's select this one. And as you can recall, there were a few callbacks. So we're gonna override one, that is on create view. So on create view. And we'll be needing a UI file for our fragment. So let's create that. So project, resource, and layout. Again, right click, a layout resource file. So let's call it fragment layout and let's hit the OK button. Let's close this and switch to the text mode. Okay, and let's get rid of this constraint layout. We'll be needing a linear layout. So let's add a list view. So list view with match parent, height, wrap content. Let's add an ID. So list underscore view. Okay, our UI file is ready. So coming back to the fragment file. So let's create a view object for this. Let's just inflate this view here. So view, let's call it view. So we've already got an inflator. So let's use that. Inflator.from. And in Fragment, to get the context, you can just use an inbuilt function, get context. So it returns the context of your activity. So let's use that. So get context and inflate. So r.layout. And our layout was fragment layout, so let's use that. Again, a view group, so container, and no, we don't want to attach it to the view group. And we're just going to return this view. So let's do that. Again, we're going to use an instance of our list view here, so let's create one. So list view, let's call it list view is equal to, so view dot find view by ID, r.id, and list view. Okay, let's just copy paste it from that. Okay, it's probably some Gradle sync issue. We'll look into that later. Okay, so to populate a list view, we'll be needing an adapter. So let's create one. So let's just create an array adapter. Array adapter, let's call it adapter is equal to new array adapter. And now, as you can recall, it requires 3 parameters: a context, a layout file, and the list to be populated. So let's provide the context first. So get context and layout file. Let's use the predefined Android's layout file, so which was android.r.layout.simpleListItem1. And we'll be needing a list to populate here, so let's create one. So project values strings.xml. Let's create an array here. So string array, let's call it Android versions. So basically we're just creating a list of Android versions here, just like we did in the previous videos. So item, so let's call the first item cupcake. Similarly, let's add more. So cupcake, then donut, eclairs, froyo, gingerbread, honeycomb, ice cream sandwich, jelly bean, Kit Kat, lollipop, marshmallow, nougat, and last, Oreo. Well, we've got a list of our Android version, so let's just close this file and coming back to our fragment file. So let's just pass it here. So get resources, get string array r.array, and Android version. Well, our adapter is ready. Okay, we have to define the type of array adapter, so which is string. So let's define it here as well. So string, and the warning's gone. So let's just set this adapter to the list view. So list view dot set adapter. Well, our fragment class is ready. So coming back to the main activity. Okay, so let's get rid of this constraint layout. So linear layout, let's provide an orientation, so which is, let's say, vertical. Let's get rid of this text view and let's use a frame layout here. Match parent, hide wrap content. Let's provide it with an ID, say fragment container. Okay, let's just copy this. So coming to the Java file, we need an instance of that frame layout. So let's create an object here. So private frame layout, let's call it fragment container. Okay, let's initialize it. So fragment container is equal to find view by ID r.id, and let's pass the ID here. So our view is declared and initialized and ready to use. Okay, to use fragments, we've got two classes, fragment manager and fragment transaction. So fragment manager, it provides us with an instance of fragment transaction, and fragment transactions provides us with functions to add, delete, or replace a fragment. So let's create object for those. So fragment manager. Again, if you can see, we've got two fragment manager. One is for Android.app and one is for Android support v4 app. So we're gonna go with the v4 app. So let's call it fragment manager is equal to get support fragment manager. Similarly, fragment transaction. So fragment transaction, let's call it fragment transaction is equal to fragment manager dot begin transaction. Okay, so let's create an instance of our fragment now. So our fragment name was demo fragment. So demo fragment, let's call it demo fragment is equal to new demo fragment. We've got an instance of a fragment. So let's just pass it to fragment transaction dot add, and let's, so what it needs is, it needs two parameters. One, ID for the view wherever we need to add this fragment, and the fragment class. So let's pass the ID of our fragment container. So fragment container dot get ID, and let's pass the instance of our fragment object, so which is demo fragment. Okay, and let's just call the commit function. Well, Wiser is up and running, so let's see our application. So as you can see, application is running and we can see a list of all the Android versions. Well, it doesn't seem like much, what fragments can do, but we'll see the power of fragments in the next video. So, see you in the next video.